PPT. So just type in the Q&A if you can see it, please. Please let me know if you can see the PPT. I need just one response. So just send me, somebody just reply. Okay, thank you, Pooja. Right. So in this lecture, again, this is just the same introduction screen that you had in the first PPT. This is lecture 2. That's it. The first topic we're going to discuss is Macbeth and Lady Macbeth's relationship. All right. So first things first, when the very beginning of the play, we see that, Macbeth treats his wife as an equal. Now, this is a very unusual thing. Let's start with saying that, because this is a play written in 1600s England, okay? And at that time, there was not much gender equality. Men did not see women as their equals, okay? Like, I'm not saying they didn't love them. They could love them, but there was always a sense of hierarchy that they're superior, okay? But in this case, Macbeth treats his wife as an equal. So in the first scene where you see Macbeth and his wife together is Act 1, Scene 5. All right, and he says when he sees her, when he meets her, he says, "My dearest partner of greatness." The fact that he calls her his partner is very, very significant, because he sees her not as, he doesn't call her my dear wife or anything like that. Like, being a partner is a lot more, telling, in the sense that he does not think that she is subservient to him, that she is weaker than him. Okay. And also remember that when Macbeth was told the prophecy by the 3 witches, he had sent a letter to his wife telling everything. So he's also very, very honest with his wife. So keep this in mind, that in the very beginning of the play, we see that Macbeth treats first his wife as an equal. He gives her the same respect he would give his, male companions, his male soldiers. And he is also very honest with his wife. He tells his wife everything, okay? And the way they greet each other is also extremely, indicative of how they see each other. So, for example, when Lady Macbeth greets, Macbeth, she says, "Great Glamis, worthy Cador." Now, she is acknowledging Macbeth for his titles. He is the Thane of Glamis, and now he's become the Thane of Cador. And she is sort of, influenced or more interested in him as a Thane or as a prospective king. She is more interested in his power titles than she is interested in him as just a person. All right. But when Macbeth greets his wife, he says, "My dearest love." Okay. And this is very indicative of the fact that he has genuine affection for his wife. He treats her as an equal, treats her with respect, has genuine affection, while Lady Macbeth just sort of sees him as this person who has power, and she's married to this person. Okay. And so there is a very clear sense of dependence in this relationship. Like, Macbeth is clearly more inclined, more emotionally dependent on his wife than his wife really is to him. Okay. So again, this is a very contradictory situation, because usually women are not just financially but also emotionally more dependent on their husbands than men are, or that is how it is perceived, or that is how it used to be during the time this play was written. Okay, but here we see a very clear reversal of gender roles. Okay, where the woman is not so attached, who is not so, emotional, but the husband is very emotional. Okay. Now, in the beginning, their relationship is, of course, very strong, as I already just mentioned, because Macbeth is completely honest. He tells her everything, and do keep in mind that the plot they make to kill King Duncan, they sort of hatch the plan together. So they are like, 2 people who are very close, and they plan everything together, and so on and so forth. Now, at the same time, it is also Lady Macbeth who sort of, who has this. There's this power dynamics in this relationship, and Lady Macbeth has the upper hand. She can very easily manipulate her husband. She can do it. She is the one who makes him feel very unworthy as a man. She strips him of his masculinity, basically. And so she says that, oh, if you were a man, you would go kill King Duncan. So on one hand, what you can say, or the first point that you can say, is that she's very manipulative in this relationship, while Macbeth is just, unconditionally in love with her and treats her with respect. Second thing would be that it's sort of the power dynamics becomes very, very apparent, that who has power over whom. Usually it is the man who has the power over woman in terms of trying to control her actions and trying to tell her what she can do. But here it is the other way around. And here, when she sort of tells him that you're not man enough, that sort of reverses the role. Like, what she does is she ends up feminizing him. Okay. And by feminizing him, she insinuates, or she suggests, that he is weak and that he is meek. Okay, that he's not capable, that he's scared, that he's a coward, and that leads to his feminization, to his stripping of his masculinity. Now, when she does that, when she feminizes him, it suggests that even Lady Macbeth associates the idea of femininity with weakness. Okay, we already talked about this in the last class. Remember how she was calling to the supernatural spirits and asking her to stop her menstruation so that she would be unfeminized and therefore she would be stronger and more powerful. Okay, so what is very ironic in this aspect is that she is a woman who is extremely strong, okay, and yet she just associates femininity with weakness. Okay, so Lady Macbeth doesn't see that feminine characters, that femininity could also lead to strength and power. She sort of sees her strength and power, and she sees it in the sense that she makes herself masculine, and she insults Macbeth by making him feminine, like, saying that you're not man enough. Okay, now, at the same time, despite she doing all of this, she also really mothers Macbeth. What do I mean by she mothers Macbeth is that Macbeth makes a lot of mistakes during the play. So when he kills King Duncan, he forgets the dagger. So she takes the dagger away. She puts the blood on the guards to make them look like they have killed him. So she's always sort of like fixing Macbeth's mistakes. Okay, so you can just sort of apply the idea of, like, behind every great man there's a woman. So that's pretty much what is happening here. So Lady Macbeth does two very contradictory roles. At the same time, she really insults her husband. Okay, on the other hand, she also enables him. Okay, she also protects him. She also enables his actions. So she's doing two contradictory roles in this sense. Okay, now moving on. I'm sorry if I'm going really, fast, but I assume that you will get access to the videos and so on and so forth. I am now seeing a lot of yes ma'ams. I did not see this. It takes some time for the live quick Q&A to show up. In the meantime, guys, I will try to finish it 15 minutes before this class ends. Okay, so when I do that, just so in that time you can put your questions in. And let's say I'm going through some slide and you're sort of confused, you don't know, you didn't understand me really well. So just put it in the chat, okay, in the Q&A, and I will go through the questions as quickly as I can, like at the end of the class. So we will address the questions because I do want to answer your doubts. And another important thing is that this is sadly our last class. We don't get another 2-hour session as it used to be before. So we have to really put our heads down and finish the play. Now, but don't worry, we have some very interesting things coming up, so just stay focused. Now, in Act 3, Scene 2, without telling his wife, Macbeth arranges the murder of Banquo and also his son. I've not mentioned Fleance here, but you know that he tries to kill Banquo and his son. And this is the turning point in their relationship, because this is the first time Macbeth does something which which he hasn't told his wife, or which he hasn't confided in his wife. He does an action without telling his wife. Okay, so in this sense they have sort of swapped position, meaning that Lady Macbeth no longer has power over her husband. She can no longer tell her husband what to do and what not to do, because he's just doing whatever he wants to now. Okay, and at the same time Macbeth has now sort of acquired this power, uh, and this is something which is new to him. So how does he acquire the power? He acquires the power by killing King Duncan before, and he becomes the king. So he's gotten a taste of power. He's gotten a taste of his of what power can do, and therefore now that he knows power, he no longer feels the need to consult his wife, to keep his wife in this whole scheme of things. He sort of disregards her, that he no longer needs this person. Okay, however, here the Lady Macbeth sort of keeps trying to protect him and to care for him. As I said before, she sort of mothers him. Okay, and here, so for example, when Macbeth hallucinates in the banquet, remember that after they kill the king, they throw a party, like not because they kill the king, they just sort of throw the party to bring all the other lords and all the other thanes in the party, to sort of like turn them over to their side, so that they don't think that Macbeth is bad or whatever. And at this party, Macbeth starts to hallucinate. He starts to see Banquo's ghost and so on and so forth. So Lady Macbeth tried to sort of like take the attention away from them, and she sort of becomes the hostess of the party, and this. So she's still protecting Macbeth in that sense. Now, with her husband out of her life, Lady Macbeth becomes completely depressed. Now, yes, she is. So and at this point, we realize that in the beginning, when the relationship looked like Macbeth is more dependent on his wife than his wife is dependent on him, this idea is sort of overturned. All right, like, so here we realize that even Lady Macbeth was equally dependent on her husband. Okay, and in what sense was she dependent? The fact that Macbeth would listen to her, he would take her advice, sort of listen to his advice. It legitimized, it validated her position as his wife, as the queen. Okay, so her existence was validated by the fact that her husband would listen to her, that he would take her advice. Okay, so when Macbeth has no need for her, her purpose of existence really sort of falls away, and therefore she becomes depressed. Okay, and now because she's isolated, she no longer has Macbeth to talk to even to control or whatever. She has lost the purpose in her life, so she falls into a state of isolation, and this state of isolation leads to her guilt of killing, or being a part of the killing of King Duncan, and later Lady Macduff, and so on and so forth. She's overcome by guilt, and this guilt leads to her madness. Okay, so what basically happens is, because Macbeth moves away from her life, because Macbeth no longer has any need for her, this leads to her isolation, which leads to her guilt, which leads to her becoming mad. And essentially, when Lady Macbeth's dominance in the relationship diminishes, she becomes to this anxious childlike figure. Like, she doesn't know what she will do when she's not controlling her husband. Okay, now Macbeth, on the other hand, like, remember I just said that Lady Macbeth, even when her husband no longer pays attention to her, she still strives to protect him. Macbeth, on the other hand, does not take his wife's degrading condition seriously. Like, he is told a few times in the play that his wife is going mad, that she's hallucinating and this and that. He doesn't take it seriously, and he's only concerned about safeguarding his position as a king, right? Because once he becomes king, he doesn't stop there. He just goes on killing more people to ensure that nobody else becomes king in his place, right? So he's just concerned about that. He's only concerned about protecting his throne. He's not concerned about the fact that, his wife, who sort of, instigated the whole murder of King Dunstan, he doesn't care about her anymore. Okay. And 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 this becomes very prominent when Lady Macbeth dies, and he feels nothing. So he says she should have died hereafter. He says, usko to marna hi tha, basically. So, and this is in Act 5, Scene 5, as I've already mentioned. So, again, now the connection that he had shared with his wife has completely become destroyed. It's non-existent. Okay. Now, here, if you see the second last point, which I've mentioned, the play proves that brawn and brains seldom seek refuge in the same place, in the same person. What really this means is that people are either physically strong, or they're clever, or they're smart. It is very rare that somebody who's physically strong is also very, very clever. Okay, so Macbeth, while Macbeth is the one who is very strong and brave, it is the wife who does all the thinking. Okay, so they make a good team, because on one hand you have the brains, on the other hand you have the strength, and they sort of come together as a strong power couple, you can say. All right, but the second they separate, the second Macbeth sort of shuns his wife away and starts making his own decisions, it leads to both of their downfalls. All right, it leads to both of the, like, his wife goes mad and then commits suicide, and then Macbeth sort of becomes more and more paranoid, more and more tyrannical, and therefore it's sort of, the happy relationship, the relationship that sort of complemented each other, or that sort of fulfilled the weakness of the other, that when that degenerates, even the two characters separately also completely get destroyed. Okay, so because he starts, the last point, because he starts to undermine his wife, because he no longer has that thinking aspect, to be bought in by the character of his wife, his downfall becomes imminent. Because had he been still consulting his wife would have told him, you don't need to kill this person, you don't need to do that. But he just acts irrationally because he's not thinking, and the thinking person is his wife. While on the other hand, the wife who does all the thinking and actually doesn't have any power to do anything, she is sort of stripped away from that position, doesn't know what to do, becomes an anxious childlike figure. So they both end up succumbing to their weakness. Okay, as soon as they start operating separately, right? Now, that's all about Lady Macbeth and Macbeth and their relationship. Now we are going to move on towards the topic of symbolism of nature. Now this is a very important topic, and this will come up a lot if you further study, Shakespeare. I don't know if you will be doing an MA or not, but if you do, you will have more Shakespeare, and this is a topic which keeps recurring a lot. For more bonus points, you can also mention that this theme is very, very prominent in another Shakespearean tragedy written during the Jacobean age, which was King Lear. Okay, now in medieval times, or even during the times when Shakespeare was writing, it was believed that if there is a good king, a moral king or a just king who wants to do good for his people, then the health of the country, by health of the country, I mean literally the health of the people, the economy, as well as the agriculture, that would be very fruitful. There would be good harvest. The seasons would be nice. They would be tolerable. Okay, the seasons would be in the sense that there is enough rain for good harvest, there is enough sunshine, the winters are not too cold, and so on and so forth. So if a kingdom is ruled by a good king who cares for his people, then it is also reflected in the sense that how the culture of how the culture of the society is shaped, or how the health of the society is shaped. And when I say health of society, I don't just mean that people are healthy, or that they have enough food to eat, so on and so forth, but it also means the whole situation with the nature itself. Okay, and you can also connect this with the first scene in Oedipus Rex. Remember, so when the king is killed, There we are told about, there is a drought, there is a famine, people are starving, there is no food, and so on and so forth. And this is because the king had been killed unjustly, and because the current king is not a moral person. Okay, so it gets reflected in the nature, like, okay. So what then we can talk about is Macbeth. And guys, keep this in mind, where you see the word Macbeth and it is italicized, like this. It means that I'm talking about the play, not the character. If I'm talking about the character, it would be like this. And if it is italicized, it means that I'm referring to the play Macbeth, not the character of Macbeth. Okay? So Macbeth shows this connection, like the play shows this connection between the political and the natural world. Okay, so when and remember in Act 2, Scene 4, and I told you to keep this in mind when we were talking about the summary. Ross, this another Thane, he meets an old man and he talks about all the calamity in nature which is happening. There are storms, there are cyclones, there is torrential rainfall. So the nature has basically gone haywire. It has gone berserk. The nature has gone mad. Okay, now and Ross is told this by this mysterious old man who appears in just that one scene. And it could be said that the mysterious old man is a symbol of God. Okay, he could also connect him to this supernatural element. You don't have to do it really, but the idea here is that like the old man character is like a god character, and he comes and tells Ross that, because Macbeth has disrupted the social order, the political world, God is unhappy, and his unhappiness is resembled by the extremities that is happening in nature. So the storms and the cyclones and so on and so forth, they become symbolic of God's anger against man, who is not against man, or against the king who is not ruling justly. Okay, so in this scene, we see that, and because Macbeth disrupts the social and political order by murdering Duncan, and therefore the nature goes haywire. All right, now the unnatural events of the physical world, by the physical world I mean the natural world, sort of becomes an outwardly manifestation, becomes an outwardly proof of the horror of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth's acts. you know so until now you can interpret the things happening in nature. First, a good king will have a good harvest, will have a good social and political order, and therefore a good natural order. Okay, a good king's rule reflects in good nature, good harvest, good rain, so on and so forth. The second nature is the second man disrupts this political and social order. God becomes unhappy, and his unhappiness manifests in the form of extremities happening in nature, natural calamities. All right, and another interpretation is that these unnatural things happening in the natural world, like we don't have torrential rains and storms and thunderstorms every day, right? So when these unnatural things happening, it sort of becomes an outwardly manifestation, or a physical manifestation of the crimes committed by Macbeth and Lady Macbeth's acts. Okay, now it is also very significant that you can identify the good characters in the play by just how they talk about nature. All right, so you will see that King Duncan and Malcolm, Malcolm is King Duncan's son, and they use metaphors of nature when they speak about kinship. So they say that we are not the rulers of nature, we're not the rulers of people, we are gardeners. We are helping Scotland grow and to flower and to flourish. So they see themselves not as somebody controlling Scotland. They see as themselves as gardeners who want to help Scotland become more fruitful. Okay, so this means that they are sort of in sync with nature, that they go with nature. They are not trying to control nature. They see themselves in terms of nature analogy, and therefore their compliance with nature also shows that they are good kings. Okay. Now, in contrast, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, because there are not good characters, like at this point they're not good, they're not, well, you can say they're great characters, they're not villains as such, but because they commit all these treacherous acts, because they commit acts that go against nature, like they commit unnatural acts. Keep this word in mind, unnatural acts, because killing a king is killing anybody is an unnatural act. Okay, so they try to hide from nature. Okay, there are lines in the play where they would say that they want to hide from nature. They want all the stars to disappear, and they are also not honest with nature. They want to be manipulative. So Lady Macbeth tells tells Macbeth in Act 1, Scene 5, before they murder Duncan, that he should pretend to be like an innocent flower, but he's actually a serpent. Okay. Now, now basically they're abusing nature. They are rejecting the truthfulness of nature, and therefore when they do end up committing crimes, the nature responds by showing extreme variations in nature. Okay. Now, the implication here, last point, is that Lady Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, once they have given themselves to extreme selfishness of ambition, because yes, they are both acting out of ambition and desire to power, they have themselves become unnatural. Okay, and because they have themselves become unnatural, it ends up leading to their downfall. All right, and this idea, the fact that they become unnatural by committing unnatural crimes, right, like regicide and several other murders, because they're now unnatural in the sense that they're not really in line with nature, in sync with nature, it leads to their downfall. Okay. And their defeat can also be interpreted as man can never conquer nature. All right. So, man, you have to understand that the idea of man at this time is that yes, he has some agency and he has some power, but he is never powerful enough to conquer nature. That meaning that if he does any, of course, he's not trying to conquer storms or anything like that in the play, but if he tries to do something which is against the natural order of things, then nature will come out and punish him. All right. Or he would be, or the scheme of things would take place in a way that nature would ensure that it is displeased by what is happening in the human world. All right. Now, I hope that is clear. If it is not clear, you can just type your question in the chat, in the Q&A, and I will come back to it later. We have 20 slides, and I'm just on I'm just on 3 slides till now. All right. Now, we will now talk about the role of the supernatural in the play. I think this is probably the most interesting theme in the play. And if you guys ever get a chance to see Macbeth, or if you can find a a play, not the movie I'm saying, I mean, you can watch Macbeth, of course, but if you can find a live like a performance of a play online on YouTube, I would definitely suggest it, because this play is absolutely beautiful to watch, in especially in those scenes where you have the witches appearing. It's like there's like a lot of smoke in the screen. It's all dark and there's like sparks happening. It's a very mesmerizing sort of a very, like, it's very scary, but also very, like, appealing. Like it enthralls you, it grabs your attention. So supernatural, why is there a supernatural element in the play? But first of all, always keep in mind that these plays were not written for analysis, and not written for critical whatever interventions. When these plays were written, they were essentially for entertainment. Always keep that in mind. So, and of course, because this is not a novel, it's a play, it's supposed to be performed, and it was written to be performed, really. So he had to put in certain very popular elements, and the idea of the supernatural, ghosts, fairies, witches, demons, and so on and so forth, have been popular throughout. Like 10,000 years ago it was popular, 1,000 years ago it was popular, it is even popular now. It is popular in all cultures, it is popular in all countries. We have that thing, that this fascination for the supernatural is actually something that is present, you know, regardless of the time you're looking at, regardless of the place you're looking at. Okay. And therefore, first and foremost, it has been introduced in the play because it is just something which is very popular. And of course, Shakespeare wants his, he has to put popular elements in the play so that the audience can, enjoy the play. And this brings me to the second point, that it is a troupe for entertainment. So when you are performing dramatic elements, okay, so think about how the stage, how the production of the play would be. So think about the scene where Macbeth sees a floating dagger in the air. Okay, so how would they play out the scene? And imagine the audience watching, like, just a dagger floating in the air. So it sort of gives this beautiful immersive experience, right? So, and it is more enthralling because you're seeing it in live, right? So, and this aspect, of course, it just makes the whole thing very entertaining. There are, of course, thematic concerns regarding these supernatural elements, which I will talk about. But firstly, you need to just understand that it was introduced because supernatural was something just has been popular throughout any age. Secondly, it's a troupe of entertainment to keep the audience interested in the play. And now, coming to the more thematic concerns, the supernatural drives the element of the play, drives the action of the play. How? Uh, First and foremost, of course, the witch's prophecy, right? If Macbeth was not told that there is a prophecy about him becoming the king of Scotland, he may not have gone and killed King Duncan. So that's one of the reasons that drives the action of the play. Not the only reason, one of the reasons. Keep that in mind. And then, we see Macbeth hallucinating about the dagger, about Banquo's ghost, and so on and so forth. That again sort of pushes the play forward. How? Because through his hallucinations, and we realize that Macbeth is sort of losing grasp over reality, that he's become completely paranoid, and this leads to more murders, right? This leads to more killings, and this is how the play sort of moves forward. Again, there are the apparitions. In the apparition scenes, remember how Macbeth goes back to the witches to ask for more prophecies, and then he's shown all these apparitions. Again, when he sees the apparitions, that based on the apparitions, Macbeth sort of acts further, and therefore the apparitions also move the play forward. Lady Macbeth calling to the spirits. This happens before. This happens in Act 1, and this is before Lady Macbeth and Macbeth are seen together in a scene where she is calling upon the spirits, saying that make me defeminized, make me desexed, so that I become stronger, so that I become powerful, and so that I am able to make my husband, so that I'm able to convince my husband to go kill King Duncan. Okay. Now, yes, you can argue that, can you really say it pushes the play forward? But the idea here is that supernatural elements are called upon to help to enable actors, to enable characters to do something, and that doing something takes the play forward. All right. Now, as I said, the supernatural elements does drive the play forward, but it does not take away the tragic hero's freedom to act and his free will. Okay. This is very, very important, because when we talk about a tragedy, some things, or Shakespearean tragedy, or Elizabethan tragedy, or Jacobean tragedy, there are some elements which are very significant to what goes into defining a Shakespearean, Elizabethan, and Jacobean tragedy. One of the key elements is that the tragic hero, or like few of the elements, that the tragic hero is always of noble birth, so that when he falls from his grace, when he falls from his position, it's more significant, more impactful. Second thing, which is very, very important for a tragedy, is that the tragic hero always has agency. Okay, he always has the freedom. And by agency, again, please don't confuse the word agency with like an advertising agency or something. It means the ability to act, to ability to do an action, okay, to ability to make decisions. So the tragic hero's agency, his ability, his freedom to act is something very, very important. Because, for example, if I say that if everything is driven by fate, if tragic hero doesn't do anything on his own, okay, if he doesn't do anything on his own, then that sort of frees him from any responsibility. So जैसे कि if he does something bad and he does it because of circumstances that he has no control over, then he is not responsible for it, okay. But therefore his agency, the fact that he does something out of his own free will, therefore it makes him responsible for his actions, therefore he is subjected to justice, and therefore this leads to his downfall, okay. So he needs to be, so the bad actions that he takes, or the tragic hero takes, the bad decisions the tragic hero takes, has to be because he takes them, because he has the agency to take them. It is not because something has because of something external that leads to those actions. He has control. Always keep this in mind. So even though, yes, the witch's prophecy, they push him in a certain direction, that this is the prophecy and you will be king. Keep this in mind that Macbeth did not really need to act on it. The witches do not tell him that go kill the king. They tell him that you will be king. It is Macbeth who acts on this prophecy. He did not need to act on it. And the fact that he acts on it is not instructed by anyone that do this thing. Okay. And if you say that, okay, his wife said that you do it, again, at the same time, he can refuse his wife. He does not need to do what his wife is saying. So he is pushed, but he also mobilizes. He also uses his own right of free will, right of action, to do what he wants, and therefore he is responsible for his actions. All right. Now, I will come back to the whole topic of free will again, because that's a different topic that I will talk about. But just keep this in mind, that do not make the mistake of saying the supernatural elements drive the action. You can say supernatural elements drive the action of the play, but you also have to mention that they are not the only things that drive the action. It is also the heroes willing participants in driving the action, in killing King Duncan and killing subsequent other people. Now, what are the supernatural elements? Very quickly, I will talk about the three witches. Again, like I will talk about the three witches in length in the next couple of slides. But now, how would you interpret the three witches? This is a very, very debatable idea, and because we are studying literature, we are not studying mathematics. There are no right answers, there are no wrong answers, as long as you can argue your point of view well. Okay, this is something which I have told people who have been in my class before, that if you can argue your point well, that's it, that's fine, because there's no right or wrong answers. Now, the witches. My question to you really is to invite you to think that, are they just fate, or are they external embodiment of Macbeth's deep-seated desire for power? All right. By fate, I mean that are the witches just simply characters who show up and who sort of tell Macbeth that he will be the king, and so on and so forth? Is their role just as messengers of what will happen in the future, or do they sort of embody, they become external embodiment, or like, let's say, external representation of Macbeth's deep-seated power? Okay, so it's up to you how you want to see it. Do you want to see them as just messengers who are just conveying a message of what will happen in the future, or do you think that they basically channelize, or they basically embody, they basically represent the dark side of Macbeth, the dark side of desire for power in Macbeth? Okay, and they just saying the prophecy just sort of legitimizes, just sort of allows Macbeth to act on those desires, right? Now, again, the question of the prophecy. what do you think? Does the prophecy, is it simply stating the future, or does it make the future happen? Hmm? So the point here is just for you to understand, just for you to think about, and for you to argue that you can bring both points together. Like that's what you want to do if you ever get a question on this. That is the prophecy something that leads, that leads to, um, how would I say it? Is the prophecy something which just tells the future that this has already been decided. This has already been decided, and I'm just telling you what's going to happen. Or because because the prophecy is spoken, therefore it leads to the future events. I hope you're understanding the difference between the two. One is seeing the prophecy as something that only tells the future which has already been decided, or it is seen as something that leads to the future. Okay, that leads to the future events. Now here, again, not many of you might have been there, but we had a lecture on Calvin's predestination and free will. And this is where the idea comes in. Are you predestined? Is everything already decided? Was it really already decided that Macbeth would kill King Duncan and become king, or because the prophecy was said this, therefore it led to these events? Okay, was it because Macbeth, it was all predestined, or was it because Macbeth used his free will? Now, remember what I said in the last slide, that this is ultimately a Shakespearean tragedy, a Jacobean tragedy, where the hero does have free will. Okay, so my point of view would be that this is not fate. This is really just free will. That the prophecy leads to, pushes Macbeth to exercise his free will, rather than just declaring what has already been decided. Okay, now, and why am I saying this? Because besides the whole tragic hero having free will point, this is also this play is written after the age of Renaissance, where belief in man's ability, in man shaping his future, was something which was very predominant, right? As opposed to the idea of everything is decided, God has decided what will happen, and that's that. No, no, no. This is happening after the age of Renaissance, where man as a very central character was established, that man has the power to decide how he lives his life, how he decides his future. All right, so man has the capability of shaping what he wants in his life. um the next element is, of course, the ghostly dagger. Again, a question here. uh do you see this as a warning? Okay, or do you see this as a sign of encouragement? Because remember, when Macbeth is going to kill King Duncan, he sees the ghostly dagger, and the ghostly dagger sort of points to the room where King Duncan is sleeping. Now, the question I want to pose to you is, do you think the ghostly dagger is sort of warning him, trying to stop him from doing what he's doing, or it is encouraging him to go kill the king? Okay, so up to you how you want to interpret it. I cannot really decide what it is, but it's up to you. I would say, keeping in line with the play, I would say that it looks like an encouragement, but it is actually a warning, because this is something which constantly happens. The supernatural elements can be quite deceptive, right? Because remember the apparitions where he's told that he cannot be killed by a man who's born from a woman, that he cannot be killed unless Birham Wood moves to Dunisan Castle. So all of these, they look very deceptive, that aisa to ho nahi sakta, but they still happen. So in a way, the dagger pointing towards King Duncan's room looks like it is a sign of encouragement, but it actually could just mean a sign of warning, right? Lady Macbeth calling to the spirits, again, there's an evocation of supernatural powers to de-sex her, and I've already talked about that. The appearance of Banquo's ghost, there's not much ambiguity. It basically is a representation of Macbeth's guilt. Okay, so the idea here is that Banquo's ghost is actually a ghost which everybody can see, because the three witches everybody can see, right? Like, by everybody I mean like the characters in the play. The three witches, even Banquo could see, but here the ghost is basically, just Macbeth's, a representation of guilt. So it could be just all in his mind. It could be that there's really there's no ghost, he's just seeing it. And yes, you as the audience would see the ghost on the stage because it adds to the whole, dramatic beauty of the play. It just looks a lot more, it's interesting if you see an actual ghost rather than Macbeth saying that, oh, I'm seeing a ghost. Okay, so understand that the fact that you as an audience can see the ghost does not mean that everybody can. It just means that this is what is going on in Macbeth's mind, that he's hallucinating. Okay, so and this sort of applies to the idea of the ghostly dagger as well, that the ghostly dagger is not actually there, something just that Macbeth imagines. The apparitions, again, are they characteristically cryptic? What I mean characteristic cryptic is usually prophecies or visions. Okay, they're not very clear. Like there's always some ambiguity. There's always some ambiguity about how are you going to, like, what is going to happen. It is up to you. It is up to you. Is it just ambiguous because are they just cryptic because that's just how usually apparitions and visions and prophecies are, or is it intentionally misleading? Does it intentionally make Macbeth think that he is he is undefeatable? For example, again, the prophecy about he not being, the apparitions about he not being able to be killed by a man born out of a woman, or he cannot be killed unless dirham wood moves. These apparitions indicate that are they intentionally misleading for Macbeth to think that he cannot be defeated, because ultimately those things end up happening, right? So, and in case if they are intentionally misleading, you can say that the supernatural elements work against Macbeth. Okay, so it is not just nature that goes against Macbeth. It is also the supernatural elements that go against Macbeth. And what is really interesting is that usually the supernatural and the nature are not seen in harmony with each other. They are seen as oppositions. So it is kind of interesting to see that here even supernatural elements are going against him. And now, when I'm saying that they are going against him, I don't mean to say that they are the supernatural elements have suddenly become very moralistic and very just and they want to punish Macbeth. They are simply going against it because supernatural elements just want to see his fall. They want to see his demise. Okay. Now, just touching on the last point is that it also so you, in one way you can say that the supernatural is prompted to see the downfall of Macbeth. Okay, and this seems strange because they are evil forces. So why are they doing something good? Because downfall of Macbeth would be something moralistic, would be something just. But you can argue that they are still evil because they're just doing it because the downfall of Macbeth would lead to more deaths and would lead to more killing. Now, there are again some minor references in the play. Hecate, the goddess, appears, and she is the goddess of witchcraft, ghosts, night, moon, so on and so forth. So even the one goddess that appears is also the goddess of the night and of supernatural. We're also told that King Edward of England, has these healing powers, and he's sort of, healing the soldiers who will fight against, Macbeth in the army. And that again sort of suggests the idea that, fates and the supernatural are against Macbeth. Okay, now I will, out of all these supernatural elements, the most significant are the three witches, and they're called the Weird Sisters in the play. All right, and why was three witches introduced? Because keep this in mind that during King James I, there was a lot of concern about, witches in real life, like while he was ruling. And during his reign, thousands of people, and by thousands of people I mean actually women, because witches are women, thousands of people were put under trial for witchcraft. And and witchcraft was forbidden, because witchcraft was, if you remember in the previous lecture, I talked about how witches were seen as as seen as basically praying to the devil. So they're everything anti-God. Okay, so so the supernatural element here is so the whole idea about witchcraft was seen as something very dangerous, something like devil worship. Okay, and during this time many people were put on trial, and it was made a capital punishment. Now, if you want to ask me that how was this done and how was this possible, um, the thing is, really, there was no way of proving that anybody was witch. The chances were that they were not. Usually, what would happen is, let's say, if a woman is living alone by herself, if a woman is living alone in the forest or something, she is just a woman living by herself, they would automatically call her a witch. Okay, they would say, how come she's not living with a man? How come she's not living with a father or a husband or a son or whatever? So usually what was happening was single women were labeled as witches. Women who did not have a male protection or a male companion were seen as witches. They were basically seen as a threat to society. They're basically seen as women who are free to exercise, who are free to perform their sexuality, who are basically not confined to the house of their father or their husband, who are not controlled by man. The idea of a woman who is not really controlled by man was just so unacceptable that ultimately these women got labeled as witches. So most of the people, in fact, you can say all of the people who were actually trialed, who were called witches and killed, they were not really witches. They were just women living on their own. Okay. Or in fact, women, let's say a woman who's very smart or who's written a book would be labeled as a witch. They would say, how does she know that? How does she have the knowledge? She can't have a knowledge. She can't have that kind of a knowledge if she's a normal human. So she's a witch. Okay. And it was made a capital punishment, and they were executed. And how they were executed was actually also very painful. They would put her on a cross, and they would put her body on fire. That's the way they were executed. So yes, the whole fear about witches was very prominent during King James's reign. And so when Shakespeare wrote Macbeth, his audience had a fear of witches, and at the same time they had a fascination for witches, because they're scared of them, but they're also extremely fascinated by, because they're so mysterious, they're so unusual. Okay. And so he sort of brings in the fear and fascination into his play to make his play more entertaining, right? And that sort of, and this is the reason why in the very first scene the witches appear. They say, and it's like a dark night, there's winds howling, it's a desolate landscape, and the witches sort of just creepily appear, and they say that we have to make a prophecy after the war ends. And then the second scene is the war. The third scene is again the witches appear, and they talk to Banquo and Macbeth. So the play starts with the witches, which is very significant. The play sort of establishes the supernatural element right from the very first scene. Okay. Now Shakespeare's portrayal of the witches in Act 1, Scene 3. So they appear in Act 1, Scene 1, but it's a very small scene. Then they appear again in Act 1, Scene 3, where they talk to Macbeth. And what Shakespeare does is he sort of, replicates or shows the very popular conceptions that people have about witches, or what we have even now, that they wear pointy hats and they look really disgusting, and they have a big cauldron, and you see them they are able to control the nature, they're able to raise winds and storms, they are harming animals, they're killing animals, and when they're making their potion in the big cauldron, they're putting human body parts, they're putting a pilot's thumb, for example. And just so as not to confuse you, when I say here, second last point, when I say 1.3.28, you don't really need the 28, so I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to just save this. 1.3 means Act 1, Scene 3. Okay, so it just means Act 1, Scene 3. That's it. You don't, and the 0.28 was the line number. You don't really need it. Okay, now. This demonstrates the witch's vindictive nature. Okay, there is an error here in English. This demonstrates the witch's vindictive nature, the fact that they are, killing animals, putting human body parts in their potion, shows that the witches are actually very vindictive, that they are evil characters. Okay, now again, continuing the point on the witches. Guys, I know that these seem a little heavy, but I just want to let you know that we are, I'm just going to do the witches topic, and then I will jump onto like shorter topics, which we have already discussed. So just sort of like putting them under categories. Okay, so don't think that the Chalta Hi Rahega and all of them are very heavy. Okay, now all the topics are so heavy. They're not. Just trust me. Okay, now the three witches or the weird sisters, continuing, their mischief or their power comes from, of course, the supernatural, but actually their main power is that their ability to read the weaknesses of the people they are meeting and to manipulate them. Okay, so in this case, you can argue that the witches, when they say the prophecy, they're just telling the truth. Okay, but this goes against the idea of the witches as being evil and as being vindictive. So what they might actually be doing, yes, I'm not saying they don't have any supernatural power, they clearly do, but it is unlikely that they could see the future. Okay, what they can do is they can read or they can sense the weakness in the person who's in front of them, in this case Macbeth. They can sense the weakness in the person. They can sense that, or they can see that, Macbeth's inner desire is that of acquiring kinship, is that of power, is that of being great, and therefore they manipulate Macbeth. So you can actually argue that while it is possible that the witches did prophesy, that they did see the future, the more chances are that they use their supernatural powers to understand Macbeth's inner desires, and therefore they tell Macbeth what he wants to hear. Therefore they make up a prophecy. That will make Macbeth commit crimes. Okay, and because they are evil, they want to push good characters into doing bad things. Okay, so that's one interpretation. Another is that the witches, like, you see them, like their physical appearances, they have a beard, they are making bizarre potions, and then they talk like, as they're rhyming, like the way they talk, they talk in rhyming couplets. Okay, so they are, they look a little bit ridiculous. So in this sense, what Shakespeare is doing is that he's capturing the scary and the comical. So they're not outwardly scary. Okay, so I already said that how he captures the fear and the fascination at the same time. And here he is making them scary, but not too scary. And he's also, it's scary, but also a little bit funny. Okay, because in the end of the day, it is not a horror play, so he does not want to scare his audience. Now, Shakespeare also makes them speak in rhyming couplets, and one of the very popular lines in the play is actually double double, toil and trouble, fire burn, and cauldron bubble. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen Harry Potter, but these lines were actually picked in one of the Harry Potter plays, and they have made a song out of it. So you can look it up if you're interested. And this is in Act 4, Scene 1. So 4.1, Act 4, Scene 1. And this is interesting because, not these words. The fact that they speak in rhyming couplets is different from how the other characters speak. They all speak in blank verse. Now, blank verse is a way of is a form of rhyming scheme, basically, because remember, all the main characters, at least, they all speak in like verses. They all speak in rhymes. They don't speak as prose money, as the way I am speaking, like. Okay, so they speak in these characters are not completely, they don't speak in prose, which is sort of indicative of the fact that they are not low characters. Okay, because remember, in Shakespeare's play, only the characters who are like, let's say, the servant or something like that, a homeless person, only they would speak in prose, because verse was shown as sign of intelligence, a sign of nobility. Here, the witches are still speaking in rhyming verses, but they're not speaking in blank verse, which was almost always used by characters who are of high birth or who are important characters. So what Shakespeare basically is doing is that he is giving them rhyming couplets, which means that they are still significant, that they're still significant characters, but at the same time they're not really high birth, they're not noble characters because they're not speaking in blank verse. Okay. As I already mentioned before, the witches have beard, which again reinforces the idea that, in order to have power, because they do have power, right? Because in order to have power, there has to be some masculine element in the woman. And here, in the case of witches, they have a beard. Now, some of their prophecies seem self fulfilling. What it really means is that because you made that prophecy, it leads to fulfilling of that prophecy. Okay, so this literally means that had they not told Macbeth that he is going to become the king, he probably would not have murdered, King Duncan. So a self-fulfilling prophecy is basically you make a prediction, and because you make that prediction, it leads to that prediction coming true. Okay. Now, the audience is really left to ask whether the witches are independent agents toying with human lives or agents of fate. Now, also do keep in mind that the witches, their physical appearance and the way they sort of they're presented, they're very similar to the idea of fates. These are female characters, okay, female characters who are fates, like, who control the future, who control who are responsible for the outcome of human lives. These female characters are very like the fates. They're literally called fates with a capital F. These are characters very common in Norse and Greek mythology. Okay, so they are sort of built. The characters sort of these three characters are very similar to the Norse and Greek mythology characters. Now, for you, it is left to understand. For you, it is left to understand that are the witches really just fates that they show up and they sort of tell you what is going to happen, and this is what is going to happen really, and or are they really, these clever, vindictive, evil characters who, by making, by sort of even just fabricating a prophecy, by maybe just telling Macbeth what he wants to hear, they lead to Macbeth committing all these crimes. Okay. So that's the last question. Are they fate or vehicles of evil and manipulation? It's up to you. I would say that they're, vehicles of evil and manipulation. That's my interpretation. Now, finally, just to end it up, there is a significance of the number 3. Okay, first of all, if you read the paragraphs, if you read the acts where you see the witches appear, they are constantly, referring to some numbers. They're constantly talking in numbers. Okay, and they would either just refer to the word 3 multiple times, thrice to thine and thrice to mine and thrice again to make up 9. Okay, so this is 1.3, Act 1, Scene 3, and then they would either mention the word 3 or some form of 3 or multiples of 3, or they would say words thrice. So for example, the sailor's wife munched and munched and munched, like it's a Shakespearean spelling of the word munched. Okay, and then the first, which also says I will do, and I will do. Okay, so they say the things 3 times, or they actually use the word 3 or multiples of 3. Now, the number 3 has a very big, important significance in Christian, in Christianity, because you have the Holy Trinity, right? The Holy Trinity, because do remember that Christianity is very different from Hinduism, and they don't have multiple gods. So there is one God, okay, and this God, we don't know how he looks like, what he appears to be, and so on and so forth. And he has a son who is called the Son of God, and this is Jesus. Okay, so don't confuse Jesus with God. Like, God is a separate entity altogether, and then you have Jesus, who is the Son of God. Okay, and then you have the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is like a Holy Ghost. Okay, now this makes the Holy Trinity. Now you can say that probably this Holy Trinity is sort of encountered, or is sort of opposed by the unholy Trinity, of the 3 witches. Okay. And even in Christian mythology, the idea is also that bad luck always comes in threes. So when Macbeth is hailed with three titles, Thane of Glamis, Thane of Cawdor, and King after that, it sort of becomes a bad omen. Okay. And he is given three prophecies. The witches are three in number. So the idea of three becomes very important, and therefore the witches themselves can be seen as the unholy trinity. I hope you can appreciate just how clever Shakespeare is by just this one example. Right. Now, we are coming to relatively shorter, simpler topics. And we will, like, there is one big topic that I will do in the end, which is really the topic of feminism, which I will always talk about that. So if you know me, very very quickly, really. So what is happening is Macbeth symbolizes, blood symbolizes murder and guilt. Okay. So very very straightforward. Okay. So you will constantly very first time before killing before killing Duncan, Macbeth sees a bloody dagger pointing to his room. Okay. After he commits the murder, there is a line where he says, "Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand?" Neptune's ocean. Why Neptune? Because Neptune is the god of the sea. So just if you are confused why that word is there, so he's saying that can all the water from the ocean wash the blood from my hand? Okay, by literally what he means is not the literal blood, like the fact that he's committed murder, so his hands are metaphorically now bloody. Okay, so again, later on, he sees Banquo's ghost, and Banquo's ghost shows all these bloody locks, glory locks, which means that he's all bloody everywhere. And blood also symbolizes, Macbeth's own acceptance of guilt. Okay, as I already said, it of course symbolizes murder. But it also sort of becomes representative of his own guilt. For example, after he sees, Banquo's, bloody ghost, he sees, he tells his wife that I'm in blood steeped in it so far that should I wait no more, returning were as tedious as go over. Okay, so he's saying that he's completely, like, he feels that he's completely drowning. He's drowning in blood. He's drowning in blood of the people he has killed. It is a very dark and a very scary imagery, so just to keep that in mind. And once again, guys, when I say 2.2 and 3.4, it means act 2 scene 2, act 3 scene 4. These are lines from these from these scenes. And the idea of blood, or the idea of blood also affects Lady Macbeth. Like, how Lady Macbeth is completely guilt ridden. I told you that once Macbeth leaves her, she becomes isolated. This leads to her feeling more and more guilty, which leads to her madness. And the fact that she is suddenly guilt ridden becomes apparent because it is she who is, like, because once she becomes guilty and when she starts walking, when she starts going mad, you see her sleepwalking, like she's walking, sleepwalking money, like she's half asleep, half awake, she's unconscious basically, and she's walking around, and she keeps talking about washing the blood clean from her hands. There's no actual blood, but she just keeps seeing blood in her hands and she wants to sort of wash them off. So when she says she wants to wash the blood from her hands, she's basically just desiring, just wishing that she could be guilt free of the murders that she has been a part of. Okay. Last point is for Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, blood shows that their guilt trajectory runs in opposite directions. So when Macbeth starts seeing blood, this leads to him committing more murders. This leads to him spilling more blood. Okay, he becomes more ruthless. While when Lady Macbeth starts to hallucinate about blood, she sort of loses her assertive power. She sort of loses her dominant nature, and she becomes more and more guilt-ridden and ultimately kills herself. Okay, so on one hand, hallucinating about blood, the symbolism of blood, pushes Macbeth to more crimes. On the other hand, Lady Macbeth seeing blood sort of becomes more and more devoid of her strong personality, and in the end she goes mad and kills herself. Okay, and another reason why the symbolism of blood is significant in this scheme is because, remember, this is a Jacobean tragedy, and they're also known as tragedies of blood. And so, and why they're known as tragedies of blood? Because you see just a lot of blood on the stage, a lot of people die, a lot of blood spills on stage. So, but here Shakespeare takes it a step further, okay, and he establishes a symbolism related to blood. Here, blood sort of not just symbolizes killing or deaths, it also symbolizes guilt, both in Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Okay. Now, visions and hallucinations. It's, you can tie this idea with the whole topic about, about, sorry, just a second, about the whole idea of, supernatural elements. But I would be a little bit careful to not connect, visions and hallucinations in the same category, because that doesn't necessarily mean that these are some supernatural elements. It just means that this is a mental disorder. Okay. Like people who see, you can say that, oh, the witches thought they see visions. Yes, that you can argue it's a supernatural element. But hallucinations are usually not something supernatural. This is something, it's a mental disorder, really. Okay. So when we were talking about the ghost of Banquo and the bloody dagger, they're not, well, yes, there are supernatural elements in the sense that you as an audience can see something supernatural happening, but they're essentially just things that, Macbeth is seeing in his own mind. So that's what I really started with. The first point is, a number of times in Macbeth, Macbeth sees, hears and sees several strange things: the dagger, the Banquo's ghost, and so on and so forth. There's also a voice which at one time comes and tells him that he's murdering sleep, which doesn't really make sense. Now, again, a question posed to you and for you to, find an answer. Are these sights and sounds supernatural visions or figments of his guilty imagination? For me, like, of course, there are certain supernatural elements which are actually present, which everybody can see, which would be the witches, okay, which would be the apparitions, which would be, but there are also certain supernatural elements, as I just said. For example, the ghost of Banquo and the bloody dagger, and he's seeing blood in his hands all the time. Lady Macbeth seeing blood on her hands are definitely not something that these are not something which are supernatural. These are really just hallucinations in Macbeth's mind, in Macbeth's conscious, and therefore they are really just sort of, outwardly manifestation or dramatic outwardly manifestations that you as an audience can see. So when you see the bloody dagger, when you see the ghost of Banquo on stage, what you are really seeing is an outward representation of the inner turmoil that Macbeth is going through. And this, of course, adds to the whole dramatic aura of the play. Okay. Macbeth is really, a man in war with himself, his innate honor battling his ambition. And why am I saying that? Again, this is a very important trait of a tragic hero, because remember, tragic hero is not a villain, because ultimately we're calling him a hero, right? And the tragic hero has some good elements in his conscious, in his personality, and he also has some bad elements in his personality. Okay. And it is usually the bad elements that takes over the good in his personality, which ultimately leads to him committing crimes or whatever, and then it leads to his downfall. All right. So the fact that, and this is not just in Macbeth, every tragic hero has this internal battle where the good versus the evil fight against each other. Remember, even in Dr. Foster's, there would be the good angel and the bad angel who would appear on stage. And for those who were in my class, I also argued that they are not actually present on stage. They're not actually real. They're basically a manifestation of Dr. Faustus's own, battle, his own inner battle of his good qualities and of his bad qualities. So in the case of Dr. Faustus, they were represented by the good and the bad angel, and that is actually a very common, dramatic trope, to just show the inner conflict in the form of a good and bad angel. Okay. And but of course, in the case of Shakespeare, his inner conflict, the fact that he is tormented, the fact that he is affected by the crimes he's committing, is represented through the form of visions and hallucinations. Okay, so had he been, just out and out an evil character, he would not have this have these hallucinations, because he would not be suffering from guilt. If he was just an evil character, he would just go killing and he would be fine about it. But he is we don't see Macbeth ever happy. You don't see him happy at all. Even after he becomes king, Macbeth is just never happy. He becomes more and more paranoid, more and more aggressive, more and more angry, and he's tormented by the guilt and by what he has done to his by of killing King Duncan, of killing his friend Banquo, and this manifests in the form of hallucinations. Now, moving on to the next topic is that we did this. Okay. Appearance versus reality. A very significant topic that sort of appears not just in tragedies, they also appear in comedies. Okay, and it's not a very specific topic, related to just this play. It's a very common theme that runs across a lot of plays. Okay, and not just the plays written by Shakespeare, plays written during King James' reign and Elizabethan reign, Elizabethan's reign. Okay, now, what it really means is that how people perceive things and what their eyes see, and also what their own biases permit them to see. Okay, so appearance versus reality do not simply make it look like that people are fooled into believing something that is not there. Okay, it is not simply manipulation. Yes, we do have that aspect too in the play. For example, Lady Macbeth, tells Macbeth that he needs to pretend to be an innocent flower, but to be a serpent underneath of it. By serpent she means to be cunning underneath of it. Okay. Yes, so we do have that aspect that you are intentionally manipulating reality, that you are intentionally showing something that you're not. Another example of this is Lady Macbeth pretending to be a good hostess. Okay, so when King Duncan arrives, before they kill him, they arrive, and she's a very nice hostess, very, very, very kind to him, very polite, very, very, very subservient, and so on and so forth. So in this case, in the case of Lady Macbeth suggesting her husband that pretend to be very innocent, and she pretending to be this really nice hostess, leads to a very obvious understanding of the concept of appearance versus reality, which means that you are intentionally projecting yourself or intentionally projecting a situation which is not real. Okay, you're basically manipulating the other person through your vision, right? Now, the next point would be that let's make it a little bit more complicated. It is not simply how others are manipulating you to see something. It is also what you want to see. It is also how you interpret reality based on your own personal biases. Okay, it is also how what you see, you interpret it in a certain way because of something you really want to believe. All right. So, for example, when you see the apparitions, okay, when and it says that the second apparition says that Macbeth cannot be killed by a man born out of a woman, right? And Macbeth sort of sees this as he is somebody who cannot be killed at all, because all men are born out of women, right? He does not consider the possibility that there are people born out of cesarean sections as well. Well, of course, you can debate that cesarean sections also mean that they are born from a woman, but that's a different topic altogether. We're not going to go into that. So Macbeth really just believes what he wants to believe. He does not see the fact that the apparitions could be wrong or could be interpreted in a different way. He just interprets them in the way that he wants to interpret them in. Okay. Similarly, he is told that he will not be defeated if great Birmingham Wood to high Dinasan Hill shall come against him. This is Act 4, Scene 1. Again, he just he sees this as, well, that's not going to happen. Okay. And of course, yes, you can argue, which I already said before, that these apparitions are intentionally cryptic or they can be intentionally misleading. But at the same time, Macbeth does not really focus on the fact that these are very confusing or this could be very misleading, like there could be a hidden meaning behind this. He doesn't think of it. He just thinks, oh, okay, this means this, which means that I cannot be defeated. So he believes what he wants to believe, okay, without even opening up, without even thinking about alternative possibilities of these visions or these apparent apparitions. And the line that sort of captures this theme of appearance versus reality is the lines, fair is foul and foul is fair, which is in Act 1, Scene 1, said by the witches. Okay, so this sort of establishes the whole theme of appearance versus reality, and these are very, very popular lines. You can possibly, memorize them because they're just five, like 7 words. And fair is foul and foul is fair basically means what might seem good is it probably isn't, and what might seem bad probably isn't bad. So that appearances can be deceptive, that what might be reality is actually not reality at all. Okay. And you can also apply this idea that it might seem that the witches are prophesizing, that giving a prophecy, but it actually isn't a prophecy at all. Maybe they're just manipulating Macbeth. That's it. So fate and fair, fate and free will. Right. So we have already touched upon this topic a little bit, and I don't really want to, really drag this on and on because we have talked about this already. So again, was he fated to kill Duncan, or does he simply believe that it was his fate, or and use his free will to make it happen? So what is really happening? Like, the question here would be that would you say that this was just fate, that he's ultimately a puppet in this huge scheme of design, that God is controlling everything? Remember how we talked about predestination in the Calvin essay, and how that God controls everything and that everything is decided and men will do what has already been decided. Okay, so is it that? Is Macbeth simply just he's killing because he is destined to kill because that is his fate? Or is he really a person who has agency, who is a free agent, and who can decide whether or not he would kill? Now, in this debate, of course, it is that he does have free will because he's a tragic hero, and tragic heroes have free will. And this is the argument we made. So here, you cannot put the blame of Macbeth's actions on fate. The blame of Macbeth's actions are on Macbeth himself, because he's the one who commits those crimes. Nobody is forcing them. Okay, nobody is forcing him. Okay, now the witches show Macbeth his future and his fate, but King Duncan's murder is a matter of Macbeth's own free will. And again, you can, even if you want to argue that he was fated to kill King Duncan because of the prophecy, even if you want to believe that, Macbeth then goes and kills more people, and that is all his planning. Like, his downfall does start with the killing of King Duncan, but it sort of aggravates, it sort of increases, like his tyranny, his fall becomes more prominent. Like, he keeps falling from his position because he goes on and kills more murders. Okay, he commits more murders. And Macbeth's interpretation of the apparitions is again an act of free will. This is very, very important, because you can say that when Macbeth goes back to the witches again and they show him all these 4 apparitions, like these 4 scenes, you can ask that, how is this like, you can say that, oh, but he is just being shown his future, ye to already hona hi tha. But no, that's not really true. The apparitions are not really showing future, and the apparitions are very ambiguous, they're very cryptic. They are, again, going back, you can say they're intentionally misleading, or they're just simply very ambiguous. And Macbeth interprets them. It is Macbeth who interprets them according to the way he wishes to understand the apparitions. His interpretation of the apparitions, that, oh, I cannot be killed as per these apparitions, is again an act of free will. Okay, now Macbeth tries to master fate. That's what he really tries to do, isn't it? Because he is told that in his fate, he is going to be the king of Scotland. All right, so he goes and he kills King Duncan, but he doesn't stop there. He wants to master fate. He wants to take control of the fate. So therefore, therefore he goes on a killing spree where he kills where he tries to kill every other person who can possibly become king in his place. Okay, and and this sort of shows that, like, man has agency, that man has power, that man has free will, but he is not ultimately God. He cannot master something like fate. Fate is more powerful than man. Nature is more powerful than man. And when he tries to overcome such forces, it ultimately leads to his downfall. Okay, so let us just connect this to Dr. Faustus. Remember Dr. Faustus? I told you that he is seen as a character who's a Renaissance, who's a typical Renaissance man, and he has this desire to learn more, to find out more mysteries about the universe, to unveil more, knowledge which usually men do not possess. And in his hunt for this knowledge, it leads to his downfall. Okay, that's just one of the interpretations of the play. Please do keep in mind. And this is what is happening when Macbeth tries to, control fate, control something that is beyond the capability of him as a human being, that leads to his downfall. Okay, now we are now going to touch upon the topic of manhood. Okay, and then we will do a feminist interpretation in connection with it. There would be some topics that we have already touched upon, so I will not be particularly repeating them. I just want to see how many slides do I have left. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. Okay, we have 7 slides, so I'm going to really start rushing through it now, because we have still some topics that we have not covered. Now, manhood. Manhood is pretty much, Macbeth is pretty much prey to toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity, matlab, the idea of manhood, that men should be strong and men should be powerful and men should be action driven. Okay, because Macbeth sort of ascribes to this idea of toxic masculinity. That's why he's just so easy to be manipulated by his wife. Okay, so when his wife says that you're not man enough because you're too scared to kill King Duncan, you're too scared to take action, Macbeth actually agrees to it. Macbeth believes in that. Macbeth believes that yes, as a man, he should be taking action. He doesn't say that I don't believe that this is an idea of manhood. I don't think that being a man means I have to go kill a king. So so in the sense that both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth equate the idea of masculinity to just aggression, that masculinity can only be portrayed through aggression, and this leads to violence in the play. Okay, and now it sort of raises the question, like, what do you think makes a true man? Lady Macbeth believes that Lady Macbeth believes that a man who is able to have power, to demonstrate his power, to show his power, to take whatever he wants, it makes a true man. While Banquo is a character who believes that a real man is the one who has the strength to control his desires, which Macbeth doesn't really have. He doesn't have the strength to control his ambition. He doesn't have the strength to control his thirst for power. So ultimately, what is Macbeth? Is he a real, like, what really makes a real man, quote unquote? Okay, now both Macbeth and so their understanding of manhood basically is a very toxic, is a very aggressive form of manhood. Okay, and this form of manhood leads to violence. All right. However, you can argue that, is this what Shakespeare think, that this is how men should be? Actually, no, because you get a very revised and a very less restrictive idea of manhood. So, for example, in the scene where Macduff, remember, is the person who ultimately ends killing up Macbeth. He says that when he learns about his wife's murder and his child's murder, Malcolm is King Duncan's son, and Macduff and Malcolm together, they make an army and they go to defeat Macbeth. They say that he says that, take that news in a manly fashion, like, be a man about it, like, basically don't cry. Okay, but Macduff here shows the future king of Scotland, like, because Malcolm will eventually become the future king, that he has a very toxic and a very violent idea of masculinity. He says to Malcolm, when Malcolm tells him, dispute it like a man, Macduff replies, I shall do so, but I must also feel it as a man, which is very, very important. Like, this line is so important because here you see a character who is a man and who is saying that it is important for even men to have feelings. There is nothing wrong for if a man is emotional. Like, this whole thing about boys don't cry is, or that men should not show emotions, is actually a very, very toxic thing. And this is something which was there 400 years ago, and this is something which is also very, very, very common now. So the idea here is that men are not, they don't become weak if they're emotional. They don't become weak when they cry. These are completely natural emotions which both men and women are allowed to have. Okay. And so, and then, when a man like this, like, and when Macduff ultimately kills Macbeth, it shows that, the idea of toxic masculinity has been defeated by somebody who embodies a more rational, a more progressive idea of masculinity. Okay. Now we are going to now talk about feminist interpretation. Feminist interpretations, first and foremost, we see that all the characters, or all the main leading female characters, are just sources of violence and evil, right? That's what we see, right? So the witches, for example, they are clearly evil characters. Okay. They push Macbeth through their prophecy, which may or may not be actually true, to commit murder. They push him to embrace his violent side, to they push him to, uh, to let his greed for ambition overcome his better judgment. At the same time, we also see, Lady Macbeth, who is very manipulative, who is, who pushes her husband to commit murder. Another female character who appears is the goddess Hecate, and she is the goddess of, she's not the goddess of, motherhood. She's not the goddess of love. She's the goddess of witchcraft. She's the goddess of supernatural, of ghosts, of evil. So again, all the characters have all these, negative traits attached to it. And you can say that, like, one of the very common arguments, when it comes to a feminist interpretation of this play, is that Macbeth Macbeth sort of, traces the root of all evil to women. Okay. And therefore, a lot of people see it as a very misogynistic play, like he's showing women as the cause of all evil. All right. But my question to you is, do you really think this is what Shakespeare is doing? Because that's not, if you are familiar with Shakespeare, that's not how he really is, right? So my question here is Shakespeare really misogynistic, or just trying to, or just showing, stronger, powerful women with agency, right? What is really happening? Because are, like, yes, they are not good characters. Okay. They have, like, the witches are clearly evil. The Lady Macduff is pretty much a gray character who at the same time manipulates her husband, but is also ridden by guilt, so she's not entirely fully an evil character. All right. So what is he really misogynistic? Because what he's essentially showing are that women can be powerful and that women can be strong, or in fact even stronger than male characters, right? And why people are just so upset, because usually, like, we are so used to seeing, like, male characters being violent and being prone, but when a woman character is shown to be aggressive, or shown to be, plotting, or shown to be, manipulative, or shown to be, dominant, this is more striking. This becomes more prominent, because usually we see women as somebody who are just, supposed to behave. They're supposed to be nice, they're supposed to be meek, they're supposed to be dominated over. They're not the ones dominating. So I think, when it just makes the audience uncomfortable. It just makes the audience uncomfortable to see strong characters. That's the problem. They're like, they're just, gobsmacked by the fact that, oh, there's a woman character who's this strong. How is that possible? Like, and also keep in mind that the women characters are also punished, or rather, in this case, just one character would be Lady Macbeth, and she is punished more severely for being ambitious. Like, in the beginning of the play, it has been established that both Lady Macbeth and Macbeth, they both want him to become king, and they both plot. But in the end of the play, the way the play plays out, Lady Macbeth just dies off stage. She goes mad and she dies off stage. She kills herself. So she does not get a very heroic death. Like her death is not even, shown on stage. She doesn't even get that kind of a, respect. Also, remember how before she dies, the lines where she's talking, she's using like prose, which is she's the only major character who is not given the dignity of speaking in verse when she goes mad. And this sort of shows that she's punished. She's punished more severely by the playwright himself, you can argue, for being ambitious. Okay, because Macbeth, when he dies, he at least is able to die, valiantly. He's able to fight. He's able to he's at least able to die as a soldier. But Lady Macbeth, like, she is just finished off. She goes mad. She commits suicide. It's off stage. That's it. And her husband doesn't even, cry about that. Like, doesn't care about it. No. Feminist interpretation, and this is really the only, I would say, like, another big slide that we have. The rest are more or less, pretty simple. So I just want to do this. I'll try to do this in another 5 minutes, and then I will go through the slides. And I'm sorry, I don't think that we will have time for a lot of questions, but I will try to answer as many as I can. Remember that I told you during the interpretation of Lady Macbeth that she is also considered the fourth witch. Okay. Now, is that a negative portrayal or a positive one? Okay. I'm not saying put her in the same category as the three witches. That's why she's called the fourth witch. She's sort of like a separate category. Okay. Remember how we talked about that the witch does not necessarily need to be interpreted as an evil character. And I also told you a little while ago that usually people who were called witches were just women who were independent, who did not live with a husband or a father, and they were living on their own, and they were considered a threat as a society because they were seen as women who are not controlled by society. There has to be something wrong with it. So the fact that she's portrayed sort of like a witch character, does that mean that she is just evil? Yes, she is not a very good character, but it also could mean that she is shown to be a powerful, strong character who's not reliant on her husband. Okay, that's one interpretation. Now, here things start to become problematized. Lady Macbeth has a desire to be de-sexed. The idea is that because she cannot think that being feminine and being strong can go hand in hand at the same time. So she herself has a very negative idea of being a woman. She herself is a woman, but has a very negative idea of woman. She associates womanhood with weakness, and therefore she wants to be de-sexed. Okay, so she herself does not realize that she is already a woman, and yet she is so strong and so powerful. She thinks that she is strong and powerful because she has requested the supernatural powers to de-sex her. Okay. Now, so you see the problem here, right? That she herself is a very strong character, but does not realize it. She's unable to embrace her femininity and her strength at the same time. She does not think they can go together. Now, another thing is, like a common point of argument has been that she is considered, like, for such a strong-willed character, the fact that, she goes into, that she becomes so depressed and she, becomes so childlike by the end of it, does not really fit well. Like, people have argued that the fact that, her downfall from strength to weakness, is a result of, a very patriarchal portrayal of her gender. That this is what happens to women when their husbands do not pay attention to each other. That's a very patriarchal portrayal that, her husband doesn't give her any attention anymore, so therefore she has lost all her power, and therefore this is what has happened. This is considered a very patriarchal portrayal. However, I would say that maybe it represents the consequences of what happens to a woman who seeks power within a patriarchal society. Okay, this is what happens to a woman who seeks, like, her descent into madness could be read as a, as a form of punishment of her being ambitious as a woman. Okay, now her rejection of motherhood. This is another thing that this is again, makes her a very different, a very unique character, because she's not very typical like other women who who think that women, that being a mother is the ultimate aim of their life. So she sort of steps away from that. She is also shown to be very eloquent. She's very smart. Okay. And this again goes against the very common popular idea that women are supposed to be silent and obedient and meek and so on and so forth. But at the same time, she performs the role of a very dutiful wife. Okay, like she's always, even when Macbeth no longer cares for her, she's always trying to protect him, trying to take care of him, right? And the most significant thing here is that she is clearly more capable than Macbeth. Like she is more smarter than Macbeth. She's stronger than Macbeth. She can dominate him. However, she does not try to take the throne for herself. She does not try to become queen. Like she does not, well, she will be queen when Macbeth is king, but she does not trying to become the queen who rules. Okay. She is still upholding patriarchy because she is helping her husband become the king. She is not being extremely, she's not using her power and her strength to herself become a queen who will rule. Okay. And if you want to argue that this idea is absurd, like why would she do that? Because queens, they don't rule, queen to rule nahi karti. But that is not true, because right before the Jacobean age, right before it, Queen Elizabeth was the ruler of England for like nearly, I think, 70 years or something. And even after James, and after that, like there was Queen Victoria who was ruling England. Like even now, the ruling monarch is the queen. Okay, so it's not that it's a very crazy idea that she can be the ruling queen. It's just that it can be done because it is a reality. It has been a reality already in Shakespeare time. So it's not something like an absurd idea. But here she never tries to, she doesn't think that, okay, I will make my husband kill Duncan and then I will kill Duncan. I will kill Macbeth and then become queen. No. She is really pretty much, propagating patriarchy. Like the fact that she sort of in her, even though it's by manipulation, she enables a husband to become king. She is basically performing the role ultimately of a dutiful wife who is supporting her husband. Okay, so her character is very problematized because on one hand she's strong and she's powerful. She goes against being against motherhood. At the same time, she's unable to coincide being feminine and being strong at the same time. She is still upholding patriarchy despite her being a strong character. Okay, so there are limitations to her, even though she's not an exact feminist character. She's a very problematic feminist character. Now, ambition, very, very quickly, ambition is Macbeth's tragic flaw. Okay, it is because he has this excessive ambition that leads to his downfall. All right, there are two external factors that push his ambition. One, his wife, manipulating him. Second, the witch's prophecy. And then there is, of course, the internal factor. The internal factor is, as I was telling you before, that there's always this inner turmoil that the tragic hero has. The internal factor being that he is unable to control his extreme ambition and therefore ultimately succumbing to it. Okay, and the consequences of this ambition ultimately leads to guilt, which is manifested in the form of hallucinations and so on and so forth. And eventually, it is ultimately ambition of not just Macbeth, but also Lady Macbeth that leads to their downfall. Okay, so, because of his ambition, he kills King Duncan. He kills a whole bunch of other people. Then he's ultimately killed in battle by Macduff, and he's decapacitated, which basically means he's beheaded. And what happens with Lady Macbeth? She commits suicide. She goes mad and she dies. Okay, so this is basically the tragic flaw of ambition, not just in Macbeth, but also actually in his wife. So I hope that is clear. Guilt. I have already touched about the idea of guilt multiple times, but very, very quickly. Guilt, Macbeth's guilt over the murder of Duncan and Banquo leads him to commit more crimes. Remember how I told you that when Lady Macbeth suffers guilt, she becomes very childlike, she becomes very anxious, she becomes paranoid, she becomes mad. But when Macbeth, how does Macbeth respond to his guilt? Macbeth very oddly responds to his guilt of committing murder of King Duncan and Banquo by just killing more people. Okay, so his guilt basically leads to more murders, and therefore more murders leads to more guilt, and therefore he becomes more and more tormented. Okay, and As I already mentioned, his hallucinations, seeing Bloody Dagger, Banquo's ghost, his nightmares, and also insomnia because he's unable to sleep. Remember the line where I said that you can it's in the PPT. You can probably scroll it up and find it out. That uh, he becomes an insomniac because he has murdered sleep. Okay, all of these are signs of guilt. Again, Lady Macbeth, I don't think I need to repeat that she is completely tormented by guilt, by being a participant in so many murders, and she is sleepwalking. And the most significant line that shows her guilt and her descent into madness is when she says, "Out, damned spot, out, I say." Out, what damned spot she means really is that she is seeing blood in her hands and her guilt, and and she just wants to be done with, like she just wants to redeem herself. She just cannot no longer live with the guilt. So that's a very significant line. Out, damned spots, out, I say. So keep that in mind, memorize it. It's a simple line. And ultimately, in the case of Macbeth, guilt really leads to worst consequences. Externally, he kills more murder, like both externally and internally. Externally, in the sense that guilt in Macbeth's case leads to him committing more murders, and internally, that the his inner turmoil becomes more and more and more, desperate, and so on and so forth, and that he completely starts going mad. Okay. Kinship, tyranny, and violence. Very, very, very quickly, in the play, King Duncan is always referred to as the king, while Macbeth is known as the tyrant. Why? A king is actually a real king, as I said, who takes care of his people, who takes care for the wellness of his people. Okay. And a tyrant king, if you guys remember the little, the picture of Macbeth's character, it said tyrant king on the right. So a tyrant king is basically a king who doesn't care for the people, who doesn't care for their wellness, and he only cares about himself. Therefore, even though Macbeth is technically also a king, he is always called as a tyrant. While a real king is a king like Duncan, who is just, who rules correctly, who embodies order and justice. So a real king would award you if you do something good. For example, in the beginning of the play, when Macbeth helps King Duncan win the war, he is awarded the position of the title of Thane of Cawdor. Okay, so that's what a good king would do. And he wants to take care of wants to, like, make sure that Scotland is protected, Scotland is safe. This is what King Duncan was doing. However, Macbeth, he doesn't do anything good for Scotland. He is only considered, he only wants to protect protect his kingship, and he does not care for Scotland. And this is symbolized in the bad weather and the bizarre supernatural events that we already touched upon, right? Now, to call Macbeth a violent play is basically an understatement, all right? Because it is an extremely violent play. There's just so much violence happening. It starts with a war. Okay, it ends with a war. There are multiple killings in the end. There are a lot of characters who are completely innocent who are killed. For example, Lady Macduff and her son, and of course King Duncan, who's a very loyal, who's a very just king, is also killed. So there's just way too much violence in the play, and even the play ends. Even the play ends with not just like Macbeth being stabbed. He's being he's beheaded. Okay, so violence is a very intrinsic topic of the play. Violence is it's driven because of, you can say violence is driven because of toxic masculinity, and it forms a very crucial part of the play. Okay, and violence is also seen as a chain reaction. Okay, so once when Macbeth commits the first act of murder, he realizes that if I have been able to kill the king, somebody can kill me too. So I have committed this violent act. Somebody can commit the same violent act on me. Therefore, I must commit more violent acts, more killings, so as to ensure that I don't get killed. So it becomes a chain reaction. Okay. And Macbeth literally, and this idea is captured in Macbeth's line when after he sees, Banquo's ghost, Act 3, Scene 5, blood will lead to blood. Like, violence leads to more violence, basically. All right. Now, symbolism of sleep, light and darkness, last topic, and then we are done. So when Macbeth murders Duncan, he hears a voice. He hears this again. It's kind of like a hallucination. He hears a voice that says, "Methought I heard a voice cry, sleep no more. Macbeth does murder sleep." So this is Act Two, Scene Two. Um, what it really means is here sleep becomes a symbolism of innocence, of purity, and of peace of mind. Like I think peace of mind is a pretty obvious thing because, like, if you're nervous, anxious, unhappy, whatever, you find it difficult to sleep. So if you have peace of mind, you can sleep easily. But of course, it also symbolizes innocence and purity. And so when Macbeth kills King Duncan, he becomes tainted. He has committed an act of treason. He's committed regicide. So he's no longer innocent. He's no longer pure. So, and because he does that, he ends up literally murdering sleep. He becomes an insomniac. Okay. And similarly, when he sends murderers to kill Banquo, he is again he has nightmares. He's again unable to sleep. Similarly, Lady Macbeth, who has been an equal co-conspirator in the killing of King Duncan and in like committing regicide, she also loses sleep because she is no longer an innocent character. She's committed a crime, and she starts to sleepwalk, where she's unconscious and she's walking around, and this shows the degeneration of her mind. All right. Now, light and starlight, okay, like the light, starlight, and they symbolize everything which is good and noble. Okay, so King Duncan, who's a good king and under whose realm there is moral order in Scotland, he says that signs of nobleness like stars shall shine on all deservers. Basically means that all people will have, light shine on them. And by that, I don't mean literally, but also like, the light of innocence, the light of honesty, and so on and so forth. By contrast, the three witches are called the midnight hags. Okay, so that's a very clear contrast. Like night, bad, light, good. Okay, and again, when Lady Macbeth, commits the crimes, when she's descending into madness, she asks the heaven to cover her because she's so ashamed. She doesn't want to see the light of God. She wants the heaven to cover up in the cloak, or let's say like in a chadar of night. Okay. Of course, this is all metaphorical, really. Similarly, once Macbeth becomes king, day and night become indistinguishable. I can't even say the word, from one another. What it means really here is that because now Macbeth has become king and he is a tyrant king, there is no moral order, there is no just order. So it seems like the kingdom has fallen, that kingdom has been succumbed into, or has been captured, or has been covered by eternal darkness of immorality, of evil. Okay, therefore you can't tell when is day, when it is night. And finally, when Lady Macbeth is gone insane, she always carries around a candle, and it sort of looks like she is using the light, like again the light also becomes a sign of not just morality, but it also becomes a way of protection. Like it will protect her from the darkness of evil. Okay, so guys, that is all from me. I hope that this was helpful. I would just I'm just going to quickly read through your comments if there are any questions. And we have 5 minutes left, so I'm sorry I was a little bit longer than I had expected. Okay. I'm just, if you put an anonymous question, it doesn't really make sense because you don't know that I'm answering your question. So perhaps just put your name. Does Macbeth acknowledge or sees her wife as a powerful and wise woman? Yes, he does acknowledge his wife and as a powerful and wise woman. By the way, it's not her wife, it's his wife because he's a man. So just be careful of that. As a powerful, and yeah, he does. Like in the beginning, he does, but then later the relationship deteriorates. When Macbeth is introduced, he says, "So foul and fair a day I have not seen." Can we say that this is indicative of two choices that will be given to him, basically indicating the result of his decision, or it is just related to this victory and deaths of his soldiers of war? That's a very, very good question. I really like that. Yeah, you can interpret it that it would be that it is indicative of the two choices that would be presented to him. And you can also say that this can also indicate that this means that he is sad that he has won the war, but at the same time many of his soldiers have died. That's wonderful explanation. You should have put your name, but you didn't. You put it as anonymous. If Macbeth is so dumb that he makes so many mistakes and not a thinker, then how can he be a hero in this play? Is it just because Macbeth is the protagonist that he's a gun? He is not dumb and he is not making mistakes. I think you've sort of missed the whole point of what a tragic hero is, which I've been rambling around for a while. So I suggest you go back and look up what tragic hero really means. Um, how do we know that he's not reigning justly? We're not accompanied with the situation of the kingdom. He's not reigning justly because he's really not doing anything. All he does is kill other people. Like, read the play, really. Like, I suggest that you read the play. Ma'am, there is only one PDF of Macbeth in our syllabus. I don't know what that even means. What is poetic justice? Is there any sort of poetic justice? Poetic justice basically means that it's like karma. Okay, so if you do something bad will happen to you. Okay, so if there is no, or if there is something good will happen to you. Poetic justice basically means that Macbeth, and like, a character who was a good character, and then he sort of succumbs to him being, to his ambition, and then he sort of has a fall from grace, and then he is killed by Macduff. And here the poetic justice is that yes, he is punished for his actions, but at the same time, because he's not an out and out villain, the poetic justice lies in the fact that at least he dies valiantly as a soldier, which he sort of recognized right at the beginning of the play, that he's a good soldier. Ankit, can we consider the three witches as a figment of Macbeth's imagination? And they say that he can't, and then say that he can't consciously accept as what he wants. Can the three witches be greed, insecurity, and moral weakness, which comes together with the three prophecies? Ankit, like, that's possibly a line of argument that you can follow, but the three witches are not really figment of his imagination, because even Banquo sees the witches. Like the Act 1, Scene 3, where Macbeth meets the witches, Banquo also sees the witches. And right before Macbeth is about to kill King Duncan, Banquo shows up and starts talking about the three witches that they have seen and how he's feeling very anxious about their prophecy. So keep this in mind, that you can argue it, but they're not actually figments of his imagination. The figments of his imagination are the ghost and the dagger. The witches are very, very much real in the play. But if you want to argue it differently, you just have to bring up a very strong argument for this. By external embodiment of Macbeth's deep-seated desire for power,